Welcome back. It has been a while since I have done a video like this. Towards the end of 2020, I started with kind of like a series, and the intention was to create all 7 different videos, small videos, and then based on reflections, I'm pivoting to a more lengthier video. So instead of the quick 2-3 minutes, I'm getting to more like maybe going back to about a 10-minute video if I can. So having said that, we're going to continue on what I've started back in 2020, which is, I started with looking at, I would say, components or things that I look for to solve between an agile organization. So I started with one, which is, started with talking about zombies and queue. So if you remember that, if you have not watched it, you can go back and watch that one. Then the second one after that has to do with now that you have your backlog, you have your queue, you have to prioritize your list and talking about some different ways of prioritization of that list. And the third one has to do with synchronization and coordination. So oftentimes you have a lot of people working together. You're not just on your own. You're not a solo producer. You are a team of individuals coming together working towards a common goal. So how do we synchronize work, coordinate work? And we talk about that in my third video. So today's video, I'm going to complete all 7 of it today. I'm going to do 4, 5, 6, and 7. So number 4 is about teamwork. When you get a group of people working together towards something, there is this sense of teamwork. Oftentimes, I see a group of people coming together, but they're not actually working with each other, right? There may be some sequencing of work that's happened, passing off, I do this and I pass it up to you. There's some sort of teamwork, but when I think of teamwork, I'm thinking of, how do I work with the other person and help the other person, and maybe cross-scaling. When we talk about sports, for example, oftentimes you see an individual that are playing a specific role, but then end up in the moment, right, trying to deliver their goal, that person has to switch the role. A key example that I can think of is one of my favorite anime TV series called Haikyuu. For those of you that are watching Haikyuu, and if you have not finished and be up to date, this part you probably want to tune out because I will be sharing some information about a specific character. So sorry, you might have to tune out for maybe a minute or two, but if you're not watching the series, then great, right? Okay, so in this series, there is a main character. In this main character, this person plays the position of the spiker. Now, as a spiker, all they do is jump up and spike the ball across the net. Now, what he has observed is that, there are times when he has to actually help his teammate by not just be on the attacking side, but actually by being on the defensive side. And what that means is that you're playing a different role and ensuring that you can bring the ball up in the air. As simple as that, though it may sound simple, but it's doing in the heat of a game, it might be very difficult to do. So he continued to practice and increase his skill in that specific role, even though he's not playing that role. So what had happened is that eventually it got to the point in one of those final tournament games that he had to play, his team had to play, he had to use that skill to help his team out. So that's an example of teamwork where somebody goes, to increase their skill set to help the team. So teamwork is about working together in that. So there are different patterns to teamwork. One of the things that recent one that I've learned in 2020, they are called fractals. So look up fractals, and the name that might come up as you do the search is Dr. Anthony Montgomery. He's a fellow coach that I am fortunate enough to be able to work with. Great knowledge, and he has lots of work in that area of what fractals mean. Another patterns that will come up is mobbing, swarming, right? Those two things, right? What is mobbing and then what is swarming? So mobbing is basically everybody, like the mob, working on one single thing, right? Imagine one keyboard, one monitor, and then the whole group. And then there is swarming where multiple people working together and then that one is maybe 4 or 5 people. Let's swarm together to work on one single thing. So a slight nuance between mobbing and swarming, but do look it up. So those are the different patterns that will come out when you talk about teamwork. So after teamwork, what's the next thing? So number 5 has to do with how do we get work through faster? How do we get through the line faster? Right? If you think about it, if you go to the grocery store and you have a lot of items in your hand, right, in your cart, and you want to get through the line fast, what's a way for you to do that? Now, do you notice there is an actual line called the express lane almost, right, where there are things that are pretty small. If you have less than 10 items, for example, you can go through that line. So one way is to, beat the system where if your cart contains 20 items, you break them into 10 and 10, right? So you go, for example, I'll go with my wife, and I'll take a cart, and she'll take a cart, and both of us can get through that line pretty fast, right? Compared to a line that contains, where you're mixed with everybody else. So think about the idea of how do you break work down. So going back to the grocery example, say you got 20, 30 items in your cart, right? And it's just you going through the line. Now, halfway through the checkout, the power goes off. Well, are you done at that point? No, you're not, right? So you're kind of halfway, and I'm pretty sure that if the power stays off for, more than 2 hours, you probably either have to walk out the door without the stuff that you're buying because you haven't paid for it, or somehow they manage to turn the power on and give you some backup and, ring you out. But in the event that it does not, what do you do? Versus, if you say you got 60 items and you're breaking it down in chunks of 20 at a time. If you manage to get a 20, pay the 20, and then pay the next 20, and it's kind of grouping them, like batching them up. If you're able to do that and the power goes off, you could probably get away with the first 20 that you paid for, right? And walk that out the door and leave the rest behind. So that's a pattern that's starting to form out. So we don't really do that at the grocery store, but think about how that impacts our work. So this here is now where we're touching the concept of MVP, minimum viable, right? So when we talk about minimum viable, is what are the minimum things that we can group together to get out the door faster? So when we look at work as a whole, oftentimes you need to break down the work. In order to get it through the line faster, breaking down in a meaningful way that it brings value. Okay, so make sure it has value. We're not talking about just I'm going to finish my UI, done. I'm going to finish my database, done. Well, deliver the UI doesn't give you anything, right? Deliver the database doesn't give you anything. When we say value, we say value to our customer, value to the people that are actually using the system. So think about that. Second to last, which is number 6. So number 6 is a general idea of improvement, feedback. And why do we need feedback? So that we can inspect and adapt. Is it built into your day-to-day work, right? Is it built into your workflow that you're going to have the time and day to inspect and adapt? If you don't, you're not going to do it, because oftentimes we are there just solving problems. There's so many stuff doing, so we just constantly have to do, work, but you never stop, right? You never stop to fix something, and you don't have time. You tend to run out. So what you're going to hear often is that, we are just a feature factory, right? And that's what the developer tells you. That's, oftentimes that's a flag when I hear, we just do feature. Or if you look at the backlog of work they do sprint to sprint, all it is just feature work. There are no other stuff than feature work. So think about that. When you look at that, to me, it shows, wait a minute, what about improvement stuff? What about technical debt? Technical debt, in a sense, is also part of inspect and adapting, right? You're looking through your systems, wait a minute, we're missing these pieces here. If we were to improve on this, then it allows us to, one, ensure that our system doesn't go down, so therefore we're serving our clients, making sure that the system is up, stability, right? So those technical debt you do need to take care of. So not just feature. So that is part of feedback that allows you to now inspect and adapt. So technical debt itself is part of inspecting and adapting. So you got to have that built in. So common things that we see is retrospective for the team. And if you have multiple teams working together and synchronizing work, coordinating work, you might want to make sure that you also have a retrospective at that level. An example, if you're doing SAFe. In SAFe, in the quarterly planning, right? And we think about quarterly planning, there's this 1 week prior to your big room planning. It's all about innovation, right, and improvement. So that's the time where you get together. Even if you are not, and if you're not doing SAFe, take a look at your framework of work, your flow, to make sure that you always put in a way to do inspecting that. Now, if you're running project management, a very typical waterfall project, you probably have that at the very end of the project. One of the things that always bug me is that it's at the end of the project. I take my lesson learned from it, but then what do I do with it? Oftentimes we don't do anything with it. So coming from that is you got to be able to have action items from it, that what you're going to do. So retrospective, making sure you have action items coming from it that you're going to actively work on. Retrospective is a nice way of doing it. So you're running Scrum, make sure you have that. If you don't have that, find a form where you can have time to reflect upon things and then collect the information, inspect, and adapt. So number 6 is about feedback, inspect, and adapt. Number 7, we're coming to the end of the 7 things that I look for. Number 7 has to do with visualizing work. This one is something that I struggle with, and organizations oftentimes don't do. Even though they do it, I don't believe it serves its purpose. So what I normally see is that if you're using Jira, for example, or Rally, they will use what's built into the system, the tools, right? They'll go to the board, there's this digital board, they look at it, and it has these rows and columns, and it's very similar to a Kanban board, right? And as developers finish the work, the note or the card moves along, and developers doesn't have to do anything other than let me change the status, and that does that for you, right? Well, some people go and drag and drop, and they use that in a form to have a conversation, doing stand-up and things like that. So I would challenge you to see the effectiveness of this tool. What I see is that the tool, when we look at those tools, they sometimes lack certain things. It's either too detailed, where we're showing all the tasks, or either it's missing certain things that you can't do it in an easy, flexible way, as how we could do it using a whiteboard and sticky note. I love whiteboard and sticky note because it takes away the technical challenges. I can just physically move my card, right? Now, but wait a minute. In this pandemic world that we've got, we're all gone digital. We're not all together. How do we do physical sticky note, right? Well, there is something called Mural and Miro. I've talked about these two things in the past before. They're basically a digital version of a whiteboard. Real simple sticky note on there. Now, the other challenge I get is, well, that's not efficient. You're duplicating work. So I would challenge you to say, we're not duplicating work. We're providing a small enough information on the sticky note so we can all talk about it. The value that you get from watching those sticky notes, right? Taking a zoom out view of the sticky note, watching it, looking for places where there are too many things grouped together. Those patterns that you see from that itself is worth having the extra time to put in the extra sticky note that may say a Jira number, for example, Rally number, for example, and then just a short note so we can have that conversation. Yes, developer, you have to go move that sticky, and no, I'm going to go back to my Jira or my Rally to update my system of record. That's not difficult to do. It only takes you maybe 1 or 2 seconds extra, or maybe a minute extra for you to do that. But the gain that you get from it, from a perspective of looking at the work and seeing the dependencies, seeing how things move, is definitely, in my mind, worth the effort. So if you don't visualize work, then you have to find other ways of looking at how your teams are doing. And the other way around it is, of course, we talked about the CFD, cumulative flow diagram, before, and that's looking at data and looking into the past, right, and seeing what happened. So CFD is a great way that we capture data about a sprint, about work that has gone in the past, and looking at flow. But that's lagging indicator. That's after the fact. When you're in the moment, how do you know? So to me, the visualizing part of it gives me that power to be in the moment as I'm seeing the pattern forming up for me to react to it. Hey guys, looks like we tend to have a lot of this. What are we going to do about that? Bring it up during stand up. Hey guys, this has been standing there for a long time. What's going on? Now, you can get some of those questions out when you do a daily summit using the existing tools you got. What I find is that we tend to not be able to see the big picture using those tools. So I would combine those things. I would challenge you to see if there's ways for you to do this. Okay, I'm using the word challenge here a lot of times. Maybe that's not the right thing. The right words to say is challenge, but experiment with it. Find value with those things. So I've talked about all 7 of it. If you have any questions, reach out, comments, like, dislikes. For those of you that have not subscribed to me, I would appreciate it if you can subscribe and click like on what you have seen. If you don't like it, provide the feedback for me. Give me a way to let me know how I can get better at what I do. The intention is to deliver value to you that are watching so that what I learned, what I experienced, may help you in your journey towards better agility. Bye, y'all.